Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys That Magic. This is Hunter and Dave.
Yo.
You sound super thrilled for this one. Today, we are continuing with our pre-constructed commander set improvements slash upgrades. We're going to talk about the Dungeons of Death today. The Dungeons of Death is actually led by Cyphrus of the Hidden Ways. Cyphrus of the Hidden Ways is 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black mana for a 2/3. He's a legendary creature human wizard. He states whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once each turn. He also states whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. What do you think about this Dungeons of Death deck?
Is this Aang from like Aang the Avatar?
He's missing the arrow, but yeah, I think so.
Like I'm trying to squint here, dude, and I swear I see the arrow. Maybe it's just a crease in their forehead. All right. I think that this deck is actually pretty cool. So speaking specifically just kind of with this being the Phase Commander card, I think this is actually pretty. I think it's interesting. I don't want to say that the deck is super well put together because I actually have a lot of things that I would change about the deck just straight out of the box. But I really like this commander, and I think that this commander is probably one of the more open ones, or one of the ones that you can take in a lot of different directions in comparison to the other pre-constructed decks that we're going to be talking about or that we already have talked about. So looking at this one, it cares about dungeons, which is one of the D&D, the main set themes, one of the main set mechanics. It also cares about recursion, and that you have the ability to return creature cards from your graveyard, and it goes back to the battlefield. So I really like that because it's honestly not a whole lot of work for you to be able to go through these dungeons. And because you're just recurring whatever creature you want to from your graveyard going directly back into play, there's kind of some fun shenanigans that you can do with that. The other
Okay.
really cool thing that I really like about this card, with the first ability, it says whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere. And that's why I say that this card is so open, because from anywhere means that you can be self-milling, you can be targeted putting cards from your library into the graveyard, you can be drawing and then discarding, so maybe something like a looting effect or a rummaging effect, which both of those would trigger on this commander. So there's a lot of different directions that you could take this deck.
I think the only downfall is the ability only triggers once.
Oh yeah, that is huge. And Wizards of the Coast has been doing this. They did it with the Strixhaven commanders as well, where it was like this one triggers only as a sorcery and stuff like that. And I get why they do it. I wish to an extent that they wouldn't, but I understand that they have to have those safety valves. Otherwise, some commanders, and especially like this one, I think could go really just nuts, because this will trigger off of tokens too. And that's actually going to be part of the direction that I'm going to go in with this. So some highlights just from looking over this deck list. It has Phantasmal Image in it, which is a $10 card. That's a super solid reprint. I'm super happy to see that Felwar Stone is in here as well. I was hoping that a couple more decks would have that too. So I think this is the second one that we've talked about that has Felwar Stone. And then it has Wayfarer's Bauble in here too, which I know that Wayfarer's Bauble isn't like the biggest deal out there, but it actually was kind of creeping up in price a little bit. So it's a really solid budget option if you're looking for some ramp in your decks. The last include here that I thought was really interesting is the fact that we get Swords to Plowshares in this deck. One of the best removal spells, or one of the best creature removal spells in the format.
I'm pretty sure everybody that runs white runs a Swords to Plowshares.
If you're playing a white tech, it honestly probably should be, because I mean it is the best single target creature removal spell. I can't think of one that would even come that would rival. I mean, Path to Exile is a great card, but you don't want to be giving your opponent's lands, and life and commander for the most part is just kind of it doesn't matter. So diving in a little bit more with this deck and just kind of looking over the deck list, I'm happy to say that this one seems significantly more organized than the deck that we talked about last, the Rakdos deck. However, I still think this deck actually is filled with, I don't want to say a lot of bad cards, just a lot of suboptimal choices.
Okay, so what are you taking out?
So, same thing as I've already mentioned, I hate the dice rolling cards. I really, really, really don't like them just because the whiff potential is so high with these things. So I'm removing all of them. There's
Okay.
also like a very small sub theme in this deck of this like don't attack me please kind of thing. So for example, we have Wall of Omens and Propaganda in this deck, and those are both cool, but I would rather be playing with a lot of smaller creatures or maybe producing a lot of tokens. That way I don't care if my opponent is attacking me. My other thing here being too is that like this commander triggers whenever a creature I control dies. If my opponents are attacking me and I'm blocking or chump blocking, it means that that creature is going to die and she's going to trigger whenever it's not my turn. So if anything, I feel like I actually kind of want to encourage my opponents to attack me, and I feel like these actually work a little bit against that. There are some other
Hmm.
cards in this deck that do that exact same thing, so things like Baleful Strix, but I'm going to keep those cards in there just because, I mean, Baleful Strix is just a fantastic card in itself. It's a body that cantrips, and it does provide at least some decent block later on in the game whenever you need to kill something that's big, scary, and flying. My other thing here, Bang, is with all of these pre-constructed decks, they're so heavy with these expensive spells. So just kind of glancing over it, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 spells that cost 7 or more mana. Maybe this is just like a representative of what I'm used to playing, the kind of level of commander that I'm used to playing. You don't play 7 mana spells. And if you do, it needs to win the game. And none of these do. So I'm taking all of those out. So for
Okay.
example, things like Meteor Golem, it's recursion. I'm sorry, it's not recursion, it's removal, and you're going to be able to recur it with the commander. So like it gives you a creature for you to target with this, but I think I just don't want it in my hand to begin with, because if I do find myself in a scenario where I can't discard this thing and I happen to draw it, it's just going to be a dead card. Same thing, for example, with something like Necromantic Selection. Necromantic Selection is 7 mana, and this one's actually a creature. I'm sorry, this one is a sorcery, not a creature. So I can't even recur this. It's a board wipe. But if I'm casting a board wipe for 7 mana, something has gone absolutely horribly wrong. And I just look at it like, if I need a board wipe, I would prefer that I be able to cast it before I'm dead. So these
Why?
board wipes whenever you're dead don't do any good for you. So like 7 mana, that is way too high, and especially considering this deck is in it's Esper, so you have access to literally all of the best board wipes. Why are we playing a bad one? Okay, that was a dumb question. I know why, because it has a recursion aspect to it, and they really want to fit that sub theme. But like, let's be real. You're not playing Necromantic Selection.
All right. What
So
else?
some other cards in here, a couple cards in here just don't really fit the theme. Sadly, some of these are going to be some of the newer cards. So the first one here being Min, Wily Illusionist. This one caring about illusions, and that's cool. And it also cares about casting your second spell per turn. Has nothing to do with getting through a dungeon. I think it's a cool card. You can build an awesome deck on it on its own. I don't think it fits in here.
Hmm.
Another one that I want to talk about is, I'm going to butcher this dude's name. Nihilor. It's the other like alternate commander for this. And same kind of thing. He's a little dirtily. He kind of slows down your opponents, and that he's going to be taking things from them. But I'm sorry, not taking things. He's tapping things down. But he's not really fitting into this like recursion package, or at least not like this package that I want to be putting in here into this deck. So I'm going to take this out. And just to give everybody an idea with this, the way that I look at this is you can be building this either as like mill, you can be building this as like targeted removal. I'm sorry, like targeted like throwing stuff from your library into your graveyard. One of the things that I would like to change up with this and how I personally would build this would be a little bit more as like an aristocrats deck. So build this with more heavily of like a sacrifice theme in here and have a lot of little tokens and a lot of little creatures that I can take advantage of and sacrifice for effects.
Okay.
So those are some of the cards that I just don't really care too much about in this deck because they just don't fit. And then aside from there, we go down the list of just like not great card choices. Things like Necrotic Sliver, Burnished Heart, Eternal Dragon, Curator of Mysteries, Cloud Blazer, Cloud Blazer, Meteor Golem, Ashen Rider, Necrotic Selection, and then also Wand of Orcus, which it's a token maker, but it's kind of a poor token maker. Those are either cards that I just don't feel like fit the theme, or they're just too expensive, or I just don't generally want in the deck. Now, as I've mentioned, what I'm mainly wanting to focus on, if I were to build this, would be more of that aristocrats and really churning through dungeons and being able to make sure that I'm moving through these dungeons every single turn. So my turn, my player or my opponent's turns. That way I'm going through them very, very quickly and I'm taking advantage of that recursion as possible. I'm not necessarily so much trying to get big baddies into the graveyard for me to be able to recur, just more so like being able to constantly make sure that I have those utility creatures moving and grooving.
Okay.
One of the things that I absolutely hate, or a card that I absolutely hate about or that is in this deck, is Cataclysmic Gearhulk. This is just like the new auto include for commander products, and I'm not sure why. Cataclysmic Gearhulk is 5 mana, it's a 4/5 with vigilance, and it's a board wipe essentially on a stick. It's Cataclysm. It's not a card that I want to be casting. It's not a card that I want to recur. So I just feel like this, honestly, I don't like Cataclysmic Gearhulk just as a card, so I'm gonna take that out. And then the last card that I would be removing from this deck is also part of that like don't attack me package, and that being Immovable Rod. I'm mainly going to be removing this though, not gonna lie, because I absolutely hate the artwork on this. It doesn't look like a Magic card. It looks super super goofy, and like something is disproportionately wrong with the character's head. So just like I don't want to look at an ugly
It's
card.
supposed to be a halfling.
It looks, yeah, just like Frodo. I'm not digging it, dude.
All right. Well, is that all you're removing?
Oh, is that all? I
That
feel
was
like I just like,
that was quite a bit.
yeah, I feel like I just gutted this thing.
Well, if you remove cards, what are you putting back in?
So as I've already mentioned, I would really want to try and put in more of an aristocrats package. So things like Vizia Seer, cards such as Attrition, cards such as Ultra of Dementia or Carry-On Feeder. I want sack outlets in this deck, something that I can sacrifice creatures for an effect. That way I'm always going for these dungeons. And then also the dungeons, one of the dungeons does have the ability to make tokens for you as well that can also serve as sacrifice fodder. I want to make sure that I'm having some other cards in here too. That way I can kind of control the board whenever I'm sacrificing things. So things like Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos are both really good cards for being able to limit what my opponents can do. Those cards, the way that they work is whenever I'm sacrificing creatures or whenever a creature I control dies, they're going to sacrifice a creature as well. And if I have more creatures or if I have this recursion engine going, then I don't really care if my stuff is dying because either I can get it back or I'm trading upwards by I'm sacking a token and then they may have to sacrifice an actual card, an actual creature. So other things like that also being things like Priest of Forgotten Gods or Vampiric Rites. So all of these being basically I'm trying to move my removal package onto these sacrifice effects. I
Okay.
want to also include some token makers in here. So things like Endrixar, some things like Felidar Retreat, Court of Grace, Ethereal Absolution, and then Elspeth, Sun's Champion. So just any of these things that are really powerful whenever it comes to token production. Elspeth is really nice as well because not only does she function as tokens, she also can act as a board wipe for you as well. And then one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this is because whenever that creature goes to the graveyard from anywhere your commander will trigger, you can also include some cool cards in here. So things like Unmarked Grave, Buried Alive, or Entomb. That way you can go find those pieces and throw them into the graveyard. So you can go find a specific creature or specific creatures and put them directly into the graveyard, get a nice trigger off of this, and then it'll give you some utility creatures that you can start working towards for that recursion part. Aside from that, the only other card that I really have listed in here is I thought that Surveil is a really cool mechanic, and Doom Whisperer is a fantastic card. It's a card that you can surveil by paying life, and you can do this on your opponent's turns as well. Just a way for you to constantly make sure that you're always moving through those dungeons. You're always getting some kind of additional value here. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of all of this, I love this commander because of how incredibly open she is in terms of how you can make her work. So I think that there's a lot of different directions that you take her in. This is just how I personally would want to put this together.
Okay. That's I can dig it, man. So on a scale of, well, let's say letter grade, what would you give this before and after the upgrades?
Right out of the box, I like the commander, but I don't necessarily like the deck. If you
Okay.
go in and you start making some upgrades to this, using the same scale that we do for our just like general set review of legendary creatures, I'd say maybe a B. I don't
All
think
right.
this is like a kill on sight commander by any means, but this is a commander that if you do get engines going can be problematic to deal with and can definitely win games. I
That
don't I'm
sounds
sorry.
pretty cool. That sounds
Yeah.
pretty cool.
I think it's a really cool card. I think that the deck has a lot of potential. And by all means, if you're new to Commander and you want to go pick up a Commander deck, you're not going to go wrong by picking up this Precon. So you're not going to be making a mistake. But I do see this as something that is actually really cool in that regard too, in that still a lot of choices that you get to make whenever you upgrade and which direction you would really like to take this deck in.
Gotcha. Well, so is that it then? Are we
So
are we good?
that's about all I have for it. Do you have any general thoughts that you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I think you really got this hammered down. Very cool upgrades. I can see it doing some work with the upgrades you gave it. In the meantime, if you're still watching this video, leave a like, comment down below if you like what Dave has recommended into the deck. If you have some additional cards you think might be also noteworthy, that'd be really cool if you told us. Maybe we're missing something. If not, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That'd be cool. Until next time, go and watch our other videos. We've got all of them up. Maybe. Unless you're watching this and the other ones aren't up. But it's unlikely. So go watch the other videos. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, this is Guys That Magic. Peace.
Later.